Thank you, Louise. Thank you to the Academy for inviting me to join this incredible meeting of kindred spirits from throughout the world. How many of you traveled more than 50 miles to get here? More than 500 miles? More than 5,000 miles? How many of you are still traveling? But thank you, Louise, for your incredible look beneath the surface, for making the invisible visible and encouraging us to tell our stories, which is a theme I'm going to develop and continue with and kind of look beneath the surface. But I want to say in advance, what I'm not going to be doing is trying to bring you all over to the human side of healthcare. You're already profoundly, firmly on the human side of healthcare, on the patient-centered side, on the person-centered side, on the whole person care side, on the biopsychosocial plus spiritual side of healthcare. You almost define it. So that's not my charge. My charge is more to look at how we can survive and thrive on the human side of healthcare. And I think that's a really important question, because doing person-centered medicine requires more of you. Whole person care requires your whole person. It means being fully present to suffering. It means having those difficult end-of-life conversations, the transitional conversations from curative to palliative goals of care. I always think of Avery Weissman's dictum, candor with hope, as a guiding kind of frame. It means being a team member. Now that's a lot of fun for us independent people who have to work interdependently, isn't it? Belmont wrote once, if you don't have scars, when they don't have scars, they haven't been on a team. So we have to be vulnerable and to be part of an interdisciplinary team. It requires being open, and as Louise is advising us, to share our stories more. And I'm going to talk a little later about helper secrets and some of the things that are very difficult to talk about, that we don't talk about. It means integrating and transforming loss in your everyday work as you help people integrate and transform loss in their lives, our patients and families. There's a survey of end-of-life workers, and number one stressor was workload, which we can all understand. But the number two was we don't have time to grieve our losses. Isn't that interesting? That we just don't have time. I think we need to make that time and find ways to do that. Also interesting, 80% of the respondents said that the real problem is the workload compromises the quality of care, which I think really rings true for everyone in this room. It means maintaining and renewing your commitment to this work. And I think that's just such an important thing. And I want to talk about these challenges. I want to begin by talking actually about our stories. As we think about how we can meet what I call the challenge of caring, which I think is the fundamental challenge in end-of-life work, which is how to take your empathy, how to maintain your empathy and your compassion while you courageously assist people, and I think it is a courageous act, to live with hope in a world in which loss is inescapable. I think that's our charge. We're always moving back. Imagine on the left side of the slide is a burnout, and the burnout's very familiar to all of us. How many of us are members of the formerly burned out club? We've come back, right? Burnout is actually, you can think of it as a badge of honor. You had to be on fire to really burn out, didn't you? But we're always moving back and forth on this continuum of emotional involvement, from being on fire, too close, overly involved, to burnout, which we know has the hallmark characteristics of, as Chris Maslach's research did, demoralization, the sense of I'm not doing well at doing good, so it goes back to our goals. We're not really being successful, and we're not finding the meaning that got us into this work. That's what brought us in. Ayala Pines, a dear friend of mine who died recently from an aggressive cancer, who was one of the foremost burnout researchers, she said that burnout is fundamentally a failure in the quest for meaning. That's how she defined it. And then we have diminished caring, those days when you wake up and you're not having that special caring feeling. We have the We Care or Hospice cares are on your bumper, but when you get to that house, you're feeling like, it's not happening for me. I'm not having that special caring feeling. We've all had those days, haven't we? So we're pulling back a little bit. We're emotionally disengaging. And then finally you have, which is, at the heart of burnout, is the exhaustion, the physical, emotional, psychological exhaustion resulting from long-term involvement with people in stressful situations, which is actually a definition of burnout. To think about this metaphor of the helper's pit. So you're on the top of the pit, and the people we are helping, patients and families, are in distress, are down in the pit. So how do we find a way to reach into the pit without falling into the pit ourselves? People in pits do not need their helpers in the pit with them. And there are different kinds of emotional involvement we can have. We can have sympathy for people who are down in the pit, which is feeling for them. We can have empathy for them, which is feeling with them, which is more what we need to really do if we're going to do person-centered medicine. How do we keep ourselves from falling into the pit? We have to hold on to our communication skills, our support from team members, our exercise. We have to have a balanced kind of stance. We have to practice self-care. Elizabeth Blackburn at UCSF told me recently that they found that doing a mindfulness intervention with folks actually lengthen their telomeres. Those are the nucleoproteins on the tips of your chromosomes that prevent replicative senescence and that are associated with all the diseases of aging and with cancer. You want to have long telomeres. And so just mindfulness intervention also allows you to maybe become more present in the moment as you reach into that pit. But countertransference can put us in the pit. A lot of things can put us into that pit. Compassion is beneficial to human survival. The Dalai Lama visited my campus a few weeks ago, and he said it's essential. When we help someone, we participate in a process finely tuned over millions of years to ensure that when we help others, we also help ourselves. There was a study at Harvard, David McClellan did, where he looked at undergraduates watching films of Mother Teresa caring for the poor. Just watching Mother Teresa caring for the poor enhanced their immune functioning. Just observing her caring for the poor in a film. Gandhi is another person that we often can compare ourselves to, usually unfavorably. How many of you are feeling guilty already? That's the point of this, is they inspire us, but they drive us a little crazy. He said, and this was great stress management advice actually, he said, whatever you do may seem insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. That's really important to remember that. A little bit of help is a lot of help. That one phone call makes a huge difference for people. How many of you have experienced that? You were beating yourself up and you thought, I didn't do enough, and you discovered that one thing you did really, really made a difference. Then we have some other more problematic stories in our culture. The superheroes, Batman, Superman, and the Lone Ranger. And if you think about them, it's very interesting. First of all, they were all wounded healers. Their helping journeys all were launched with a trauma, right? Batman's family was killed in the alleyway. Superman lost his entire planet and family. Did anybody have a planetary loss support group in your program? No. And Lone Ranger, which dates me, I know, but recently there was a film for, contemporary folks. But the Lone Ranger lost his brother in that bushwhack, if you remember in the initial episode. So, they were all wounded healers, not in Henry Nouwen's more positive sense, but they were distress-driven helpers. They were also anonymous, and one thing we know in person-centered medicine, you can't be anonymous. You have to be authentic. It's not about sharing your personal life, that kind of openness. It's more about being there in the moment, authentic, without a mask. People want real people caring for them. They had superpowers. Do you have superpowers? I know some of you are thinking about it. You don't have superpowers. I feel like I have to have superpowers, but I don't. They were invulnerable. Are you invulnerable? Definitely not. Don't go there. You're not invulnerable. You're vulnerable. Human beings working with other human beings in very tough situations. They had miserable personal lives. All of them. All those superheroes. Do you have to have a miserable personal life to do a hospice and palliative care? It helps, right? No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. They were also one-way caregivers. You remember at the end of each of the episodes, who was that masked man? It would always say, who was that man? Who was that hospice nurse? Who was? They would take off and they couldn't even accept a thank you. We'll accept thank yous from patients and families. They want to say thank you to you. They love you. They may not ever want to see you again. But don't you hate that sometimes? And then the clincher is they were always successful. These superheroes were always successful, every episode. Are we always successful? No, you can't be. You can't be, you know? You just can't be always successful. So they were bad role models for us. There are some other bad role models that I grew up with, and now I'll really date myself, but some of you might remember this. Man, woman, earth, death, infinity. Ben Casey. So for those of you who weren't around then or never saw Ben Casey, I want to share one excerpt from the Light Up the Dark Corners episode in 1963, which tells us where palliative care was not in 1963. It was a program with a physician, and it was Ben Casey, Vince Edwards with Sam Jaffe, who is this Einstein-like mentor to him. Casey, they're treating a patient who has stage 4 glioblastoma, and they're debating whether to tell him about this. You know, should we tell him? Casey's struggling with this, and he says, how can I tell him, doctor? He's asking his mentor. How can I send him into that kind of hell? Jaffe, you don't. Cassidy, this is the patient who's this wealthy guy with a yacht and everything, breathes life deeply, and it will take the savor out of each breath if he knew he might die with the next. You can give him peace. Casey's struggling with this still. That's not enough. Jaffe, but it's better than nothing. End of conversation. Nothing is what was happening in 1963 in the models that we had on TV and that a lot of us grew up with and we were experiencing. Also, the story had an incredible boundary violation where the nurse at the end decides that she will say yes to the patient's overture to marry him, and she runs off with the guy to the yacht. For some of you, that doesn't sound too bad, right? But they still hadn't told him about the glioblastoma. Just let me say this at the outset. There are secrets that we possess and other secrets that possess us. And privacy and secrecy aren't the same. So how many of you, let's say we fold or crumple our toilet paper. How many of you fold your toilet paper? Raise your hands. How many of you crumple it? Okay. How many of you are saying, I don't want to raise my hand about this at all because it's a private issue. I don't want to go there. But even with a stupid question or issue like that, you see the shame issue starts coming in, like, what about my neighbors? Is folding better than crumpling? Which, you know, I'm a more organized person, I should fold, you know. The crumpling, maybe that's disorganized, but maybe it's creative, maybe, you know, anyhow. There's always a thought, and when we talk about is it really going to be positively perceived by others, and this is what's happening every day with our patients interacting with us and us interacting with each other. The distress disclosure dilemma. And when we're talking about, I'm talking about distressing experiences. When we have distress, we have the urge to disclose, but then if we have also this restriction, this constraint, that's what causes problems. That's when we have problems. And when I've looked at, you know, thousands of helper secrets, and you do content analyses, and you find that there are themes that recur over and over again, the same ones that I've heard leading support groups for oncology and hospice. Feelings of inadequacy, frustration with one-way giving, too many demands, anger at patients or family members, don't want to talk about that. It's not okay. Emotional distancing, feeling like an imposter, less frequent are medical errors, which are very real phenomena and very painful. Boundary violations, other disturbing experiences, and all these are maintained by the fallacy of uniqueness or pluralistic ignorance, the belief that nobody else is having these experiences. So when we don't share them, we don't learn that others are actually having these experiences. Here's some examples. The distress avoidance kind of guilt sequence that I've found. I have distanced myself deliberately from some patients and families as a form of self-protection when I felt emotionally overloaded, even though I felt they needed emotional support themselves. How many can really say that we've done that at some point in time? You've noticed that you've pulled back and then you felt guilty about it. Okay. Concern about others' competence, you know, about our competence and effectiveness. My inadequacy is my most personal secret. It's very frustrating to be constantly in the company of so many talented, capable people. One of the things, personality characteristics of all of us is we're more perfectionistic. That's been found. And, when you're at a conference like this with the creme de la creme from all over the world, it's easy, isn't it, to compare yourself and say, oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, what is Nessa doing? Oh, my God, I'm not doing that yet. And you beat yourself up. How many of you have felt that a little bit here? It's like, oh, I didn't read that journal article. I'm sorry. You have the imposter experience. I'm afraid that if anyone found out how much I don't know, I'd head for the door. Remember, this is a secret that someone shared that they did not want to say openly. I remember when I was at St. Christopher's, and I asked, has anybody ever had this experience? And more than half the people raised their hand. And I said, gosh, if they're feeling this at St. Christopher's, what about us? I had a difficult patient who became angry at my attempts to help her. She spit in my face. Without thinking, I spit back in her face. But here's the, we probably haven't spit in anyone's face. But here's the painful part of this. I could have died with shame. I was there to make this more comfortable for her, and I failed miserably. I don't think anyone else would have reacted so impulsively. But how many of us, if I had followed you around, all of you incredible professionals, I have highest esteem, but how many of us have, quote unquote, said the wrong thing at some point? Raise our hands. Look around the room. We'll normalize this, okay? Here, we have said the wrong thing. And again, if you didn't raise your hand, you probably just didn't realize you said the wrong thing. Which is more scary, but Sometimes I'm so angry at a patient who's very demanding, wanting something every 5 minutes, putting the call light on excessively, then I feel guilty because they are the ones who are suffering and dying, and I'm the fortunate one. I'm healthy and able to go on with my life, then I say to myself, how could you be so uncaring and selfish? You should be doing something else, like working at Kmart. Once I was leading a retreat for a Hospice of Fresno, and I developed this top 10 signs of burnout, a la David Letterman. Number 10 is shopping at Kmart feels like you're taking good care of yourself. Number 9, patients frequently startle you by waking you up during home visits. Number 8, you find yourself saying, you think you've got problems, lady? You become aware of a reluctance to go to work and you don't go to work. That's actually a burnout item. Number 6, you accidentally drop your beeper from a high bridge. Number 5, you jump after the beeper. Number 4, giggling anxiously during team meetings. Number 3, not giggling during team meetings. Number 2, eating an entire bag of Dorito chips while returning patients' phone calls. I've done that. And number 1, who cares about this list anyway? I think he throws it away like that. Yeah. I remember once at St. Christopher's, Dame Cicely learned that a new hospice program had begun. I'm sure some of the others in the room have had this experience there. And she ran over to this world atlas she had and stuck a pin, push pin, in the atlas to celebrate the single hospice program. And it was so exciting to see her joy. Like, there's a new program. She knew what it meant. And I think we've got to feel that same way and to appreciate, the significance. You're all pioneers in palliative care. You might not think of yourself that way, but I'm telling you, 100 years from now, those who follow you will. It takes courage to do this work with your heart and soul, and to know that your heart is your real credential. When your empathy and helping motivations intersect with the core needs and final wishes of patients and family members, moments like these that I want to share with you affirm the meaning your work has for you and the people you serve. Here's what someone shared with me. A young wife and mother died 2 days before Christmas. Her husband was grief-stricken but coping well. Before he allowed his children to come in and say goodbye to their mother, I helped him dress her in a beautiful robe, comb out her hair, her few strands of hair, and place flowers near her bed. He looked at me and said, thanks for making my kids able to see their mommy as they remembered her. And upon meeting a new patient, an elderly woman, small and frail, I was preparing to explain how I could assist her. Before I could begin my presentation, she lifted her hand slightly and then spoke clearly. So, you are to be my warrior? I'm sure you've all had moments like that. I began the helper's journey with these words by George Bernard Shaw. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you're thrown on the scrap heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish little selfish clod of ailments and grievances complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Think about your efforts, all you're helping as rippling across generations. That daughter who sees you caring for her mother so lovingly with such grace and skill will become the next great nurse or physician or social worker. The children you help say goodbye to their beloved parent will remember that moment on their own deathbeds and bring their family together to say their own goodbyes. You are changing our culture. You're changing how we die and how we live. It will go on and on long after we leave this place we call home. That's your legacy, and maybe that's where hope truly resides. Compassion and caring are at the core of being human. This is the inner light, the splendid torch you have in your hands and can pass on to future generations. With this torch, you bring light and when it's dark and warmth when it's cold. So make the most of this time here with kindred spirits and who share in the journey. And as I like to say, sally forth, which the dictionary reminds me means to leave a safe place in a brave or confident way in order to do something difficult. Thank you for our time together in this safe place, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.